Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Beyond Terrain podcast. I'm your host, Liam Dalton. Today, we have a fantastic episode coming at you. We got a great guest, somebody that I've followed for quite a long time at this point, good, 4 or 5 years now, and one of these pivotal guys again that I've been following, and really helped shape everything that I know at this point. So I'm really grateful to have Loren on today and to discuss with us. If you're new around here, make sure you give us a review and subscribe and do all that good stuff to help support the show. We'd be much appreciated. Now we got that out of the way. Thank you, Loren, for coming on today. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, Liev, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Amazing. Cool. Well, first question I ask all my guests, I get them to define health. And I love this question. You can take it anywhere that you want to take it, what it feels like, what it looks like, how it manifests. Gives us a good starting point to work off of.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, my working definition has always been, true health is when all aspects of the self, that is our physical self, our mental self, our spiritual self, our emotional self, when all aspects are functioning at the highest level possible.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so maybe you could speak a little bit more to that sort of
Uh-huh.
real holistic view here, like what um a lot of people, we try to differentiate, what's the spiritual and psychological health and physical health and emotional health, but it's all connected, right? And it's all one in the end, right? So maybe you could
Exactly.
speak a little bit more to that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly think about these different aspects of ourselves. You probably know people who, for instance, are mentally they're healthy and strong and everything works well, but emotionally maybe not so much, or perhaps physically. It could go either way. I mean, there are people who make excellent choices physically, but really haven't done the emotional work, and so emotionally they're not operating where they could be, um, or vice versa. Maybe they have everything worked out, and they think that because there's this idea. I subscribe to it. You may or may not, but this idea that we're not physical beings, we're spiritual beings having a physical journey. Okay, the body is just a vehicle; it's not me. And some people say, well, in that case, should I take care of it? What difference does it make? Right? And it's an understandable viewpoint. Um, it reminds me many years ago, I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy. I was younger than you are now when I left there. And one of the first things they told us is that because they had so much invested in us, we were not even allowed to ride on a motorcycle. And my best friend and I looked at each other and said, "We got to go get a couple of motorcycles," because that's the way we rolled. You definitely didn't want to tell us what we weren't supposed to do, right? Back then, that would just push us right in that direction. So the first time we got a weekend pass or a day pass, we went up to Denver. We were in Colorado Springs. We took a bus up to Denver. We bought a couple of used motorcycles and we brought them back. We had arranged with a friend who lived off base. We could storm his garage. And that summer, we drove from Colorado back to the East Coast. And my bike, which at the time would have been something like not that old, maybe 8 years, 8 or 9 years old, but it had some issues. And I wound up having to stop and dump oil into the crankcase over and over again, and dealing with issues. Well, fast forward many years, 10 or 12 years ago, I bought a used BMW motorcycle, which lives in Germany. My girlfriend lives in Germany. It lives in Germany. I've done 3 lecture tours throughout Europe by motorcycle, and it's an amazing machine. It's a sport touring bike. It's like a rocket ship, and it's a finely tuned machine. So the difference between those two journeys, I mean, one journey was a week, and I had to stop to fix the thing. I don't know how many times. The other journey was nearly 3 months. It was 11 weeks. I did 17,000 kilometers. The only thing I had to do in Serbia, I had a giant pothole doing like 60. I'm lucky I didn't go down, and I had to fix the rim. The rim front wheel bent as a result of it. So I had to get that fixed. Other than that, I didn't have to do anything. Okay. So this is a vehicle. And at some point in time, uh, probably in the next 60 or 70 years, I'll have to trade my vehicle in for a new one, right? Something like that. It won't be tragic. It's no more tragic than when I got rid of my first car, the '68 Bug, to get something else, right? It was time to get something else. Eventually, this machine wears out. We're going to replace it, and it's not a big deal. But the thing is, as I think you probably know if you've been following me all these years, I'm now 37 years without a day sick. And I went from being sicker than anybody I knew. At 23, I got sick. It took me 3 years of medicine getting worse all the time with conventional medicine. I finally walked away at 26, never looked back. And that was 37 years ago. It took me 6 months. Since then, haven't been sick a day. I have tons of energy, mental clarity. Emotionally, I feel more balanced than ever. Spiritually, I feel connected. And my journey has been much more enjoyable because I haven't had to constantly fix the machine. A lot of people my age, I mean, there's half a dozen guys I went to high school with who are dead from cancer or heart disease. There's a lot of others, they're just not functioning in the way that they used to. And so the journey is a lot more fun when we take care of the vehicle. I'm not the vehicle, but if I take care of the vehicle takes care of me.
Yeah, it's a very important distinction that you make there, and I think
Yeah,
that's great and a great analogy. Um, you know, we certainly understand the importance of our physical health, right? And we can't negate that, and we never have here on this channel. And
right.
but there is this sort of growing idea that we've been discussing a little bit of, the psychological underpinnings of a lot of health problems. Things like um, German new medicine teaches, right? That conflict behind, the autoimmune or the chronic illness, things of this nature. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, I agree completely. I believe. Do you know who? See if I can remember her name. It's a Canadian older one. She's got to be mid 70s, late 70s by now. She's a medical intuitive, and I'm not thinking of her name, but she's probably written 15 or 20 books. She had this gift. She's had this. She's been doing this for 50 or 60 years. She can sit down with someone she's never met and just focus her energy on this person and properly diagnose them. I mean, doctors will later say, yeah, she's right. This is what's going on. Okay. It's an amazing thing. She has no training. This is just something that she does.
Mhm.
And I don't remember each of the connections, but I remember, for instance, she says that every physical disease has a specific suppressed emotion attached to it. And that, in fact, it's the primary cause. Now, that's a little bit of a stretch, a little hard to wrap my brain around that. But that theoretically, we could eat nothing but McDonald's or smoke, 18 packs of cigarettes a day, and as long as we had no suppressed anger, there would never be cancer. Now, most people do have suppressed anger. Most people are walking around with suppressed anger and a lot of other suppressed emotions as well. So I firmly, I can't say for sure that she's right that there's a specific emotion or that that's the specific emotion. But I do believe that every physical disease has some emotional dis-ease that's at the root of it. It may or may not be the primary cause, but it could be a significant factor. And I think it's always there. Having now worked with more than 16,000 clients over the last 35 years, I don't think I've ever seen anyone where there wasn't clearly suppressed emotions. It's a common thing. In fact, I spoke to a young man yesterday afternoon who's going to be coming to Tanglewood with his mother in just a few weeks. He is a couple, 2 or 3 years younger than you. And I said to him, as I say to everyone, 25 guys, 25 and under, um, The most difficult part of the process for almost everyone is dealing with the emotions that come up. Because theoretically, and we haven't talked about what I do. I don't know how many of your viewers will know who I am or what I'm up to, but as you know, I run the world's largest dedicated water only fasting center and have guided more than 11,000 people through fasts averaging 26 days. This is just water. Now, the other people I mentioned are people I've just done coaching with. Okay, they haven't fasted with me. And what happens is when we get so if you look at animals in nature, your dog or cat, if it gets sick enough or badly enough injured, will lay down and refuse to eat. Okay, processing food takes more energy than anything else we do normally, about half the body's daily energy. And so if the body needs to heal, it instinctively doesn't want food. And you're a little closer to it than I am, but you may remember being a boy, being sick and not wanting to eat. Your mother probably made you eat anyway. Good Jewish mother, I guess. Yeah.
No, no, but yeah, she certainly made me eat.
Mine did. No, they think that's the right thing to do, but the truth is the body knows exactly what it needs. Okay, and it doesn't want food. That's the instinctive response because it takes too much energy. Now, most people think, well, you have to eat to keep up your strength so your body can heal. You don't. Every species on the planet stops eating when it needs to heal. But if you look at animals, they don't move. They're resting as completely as possible. A big dog, can go many weeks without food and may lay on one spot. It may stretch, change position sometimes because just like you or I, if you spend too much time in one position, it's going to start to be a bit uncomfortable. So they may change position, but they don't get up and walk around. They're not on Facebook, right? They're just resting as completely as possible. And so I encourage my clients to do the same thing. When they do, when people get quiet and still enough, suppressed emotions begin bubbling up to the surface. Now, don't take it personally, and I can say this because I was a guy your age at one point, pretty long time ago. Um, Most guys under 25 aren't that emotionally mature yet. Now, you may very well be an exception. I wasn't. Um, but most guys aren't that emotionally mature. And so we're not very good. Women are usually much better at that age at dealing with their emotions. About half the young guys run away within 10 to 14 days. They might have come for 4, 5, 6 weeks, but they're usually gone within two, half of them anyway. Yeah. And we don't see that with any other segment of the population. So it's the hardest part. It's also perhaps in some ways, I mean, the physical things that we see are amazing, but I really believe that the emotional healing transformation that's possible can be much more powerful still. Because if we can achieve that transformation where we're simply able to sit with our emotions or maybe to sit in our emotions, sometimes it feels that way. If we can do that, we're much better able to control our impulses. Because what happens to a lot of people is they do all this work and then they go home, they go back to making relatively poor choices. And I think subconsciously, they're often making these choices subconsciously in order to suppress emotions. So if we can get to the point where we don't need to suppress emotions anymore because we're perfectly comfortable with them, we have a much better chance of consistently making excellent choices from there.
Yeah. I'm thinking a lot about our discussion with the Biggleson brothers and the work of their father, Harvey Biggleson. Back to kind of what we started talking about here. That complex interplay between our emotions and our psychological realm and the physical, right? And they would talk about it as scarring in the body and it being a necessary component of holding on to toxicity, right? So there's a really interesting interplay that they propose, not necessarily that they originally proposed it, but that they're discussing, at lengths,
Yeah.
um, you know, that it's a piece of the puzzle, right? And one of the interesting things about fasting is, for me, I've done a couple of fasts, nothing to the extent of what you're doing, but the biggest benefits in my mind was not even the physical benefits. And generally I'm a pretty healthy guy. you know, but the spiritual and the psychological benefits of it was why I did it and what I really got out of it.
Yeah,
Your meditation becomes easier, becomes deeper, becomes much more profound as you go. It's quite an amazing thing to experience, you know? So, um, and you mentioned a lot of really interesting things about healing and, you know, obviously our observations with animals, you know, tuning into my own intuition. If I ever do get a little sickness here and there, I don't eat. You know, I certainly don't.
exactly.
It's just natural. I don't want to eat, and you know, now I'm just listening to myself, listening to my own body when that does come up. You know, and I think that's really, really, really important. That intuition piece. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Agreed
You know,
completely.
I think you know you bring up some really important things here about you know young men especially not being able to you know deal with and process their emotions. I'm curious what your thoughts are on why that is and also what we can do, right? What can we do about it?
Sure. Well, in fact, let me hasten to say I don't believe it's that young man can't do it. I think it's very uncomfortable for them to do it, and I think the reason why is the reason why a lot of things are uncomfortable when they're new, when they're foreign to us. You know, I was talking to someone yesterday and remarked that our clients have come so far from 150 plus countries. And I don't think there's ever been a male who couldn't complete, no matter where they came from, who couldn't complete the following sentence: big boys don't.
Cry.
Everybody knows that all over the world.
Everyone knows it.
And this is the issue, is that we're taught as boys that sadness is effeminate. It's feminine. It's not something we're supposed to feel. Many females, it may vary a little bit from culture to culture, but often they're taught that they shouldn't experience anger. That's masculine. That's not feminine. And so I think what happens is we're raised to believe pretty overtly, being told that we shouldn't feel certain emotions, that it's not okay to feel certain emotions. Okay, and so we get a bit gun shy. We these emotions come up, and we do everything we can to suppress them or to distract ourselves from them. And people use, in addition to food and alcohol and other substances, they use pornography or television or video games, almost anything. I mean, the point is anything but being present to what's going on in the body. And the problem is that those emotions are coming up for a reason. If we're willing to actually pay attention to them, we can often resolve some underlying issues. If we don't pay attention to them, we stay unconscious about them, and then nothing really changes. Okay. It's not much different than physical feelings. So for instance, if I've got pain in my knee, I mean, what do a lot of people do is they go take something so they don't have any pain. They don't feel the pain. But the pain is there to tell us something. Very specifically, get off your knee, right? Leave it alone. Let it rest. It needs to heal. Um, but there's a message there, and we're always going to do much better if we heed the body's messages. Emotions are coming up for a reason too. Negative emotions arise, I believe, and this was um, the first part of this borrowed heavily from nonviolent communication, which years ago when we had a 17-week internship program, I taught 3 books, and people were surprised that I wasn't teaching fasting or diet from a book or something like that. I already had that piece worked out. I was teaching that from here. I didn't need to go to a book for that. But I was teaching nonviolent communication, radical honesty, and the Four Agreements, because I believe that these 3 books, that if we could figure out the communication piece, the emotional piece, and how we interact with others, that goes a long way towards empowering us to become who we're capable of being. And so Marshall Rosenberg in Nonviolent Communication says that we experience negative emotions when we have needs that aren't being met. So for instance, uh, and needs are universal, by the way. Everybody has the same needs. You might remember if you ever studied psychology, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The very bottom, you had the physical needs, the survival needs. We can't survive without the right temperature, enough food, water, etc. And at the very top of the pyramid, you had self-realization, right? And so, and you can't focus on that highest need, which is essentially moving us towards enlightenment, until you've handled all the needs below it. You're not really going to be focused on enlightenment, on self-realization, if you don't have enough food to survive. You're going to be focused on your physical needs. And so if we understand that these negative emotions, let's say we all have social needs, okay, and I'm lonely, but I don't know what it is. All I know is I don't feel good. I can't do much about it if I don't know what it is. But if I can understand, okay, I have a need for companionship, I have social needs that aren't being met. Now, if I know that, I can call a friend, right? I can go out to a public place and connect with people, strangers or people I know. I mean, it doesn't always work for everyone. For some people, it can't be strangers. They're just gonna feel worse in that situation, right? Um, I do pretty well with strangers and just start talking to anybody. But if I need to connect with people, I can go find people anywhere. But for a lot of people, it might mean calling, messaging some people you're close to and saying, hey, if they're not in close proximity, I'm right now in Park City, Utah. I don't know that many people around here. I know a few, but not that many. I don't have any close friends here. So what I might do is I might message someone I'm close to and say, hey, can we do a Zoom call? Right? Can we get together uh, somehow and connect to get those needs met?
Yeah, it's that's sort of the double-edged part of this media, right? Because I'm sure we could have a great discussion on how it's harmful, but like you're saying here, there's a lot of really amazing benefits too, and that's really what we're trying to do here is use the benefits, right, and leave the rest, so
Well, social media is like a lot of other things in our lives today. It's a tool. It's an amazing tool. I have no idea where you are, but this would probably be impossible right now without social media. And I've done similar podcasts with lots of people all over the world, and it doesn't matter because if we can figure out what time it is and get on at the same time, we can connect this way. It's just a tool.
that's the hardest part.
The right. Sometimes the problem is that it's beneficial to the people who run the tools to keep us addicted, to make it more addictive. Now, honestly, heroin is highly addictive. So I choose not to use it. I grew up at a time where we experimented a lot in the 60s and 70s. Um, but I never took heroin because I didn't want to throw my life away, by being addicted to something I couldn't stop using. So I experimented with lots of things, but always with things that I was confident I could stop using when I chose to. Some of them I used once, some of them I used, 150 times. But it was always I always had the sense that I can quit at any time. Social media is no different, right? I mean, a lot of people are addicted to Facebook, pornography, whatever it might be. But you and I both have the ability to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to exercise some self control. We can do that. I'm not suggesting it's easy. Obviously, it's not easy for a lot of people. And it actually ties right into this conversation because I think it becomes a lot easier when we are willing to be with our emotions. Again, people are often looking for a way to distract themselves from the miserable situation that they're living in. They're not really happy, and so they're looking for a way to distract themselves.
Oh, very well put. Yeah, great connection. I was just gonna say, it's not as though we can't abuse natural things either, right? We can also abuse food. People can
Yeah,
eat to, stuff down the emotions as well. That's a really common thing. And, even the natural things, right? You can be addicted to working out, which is, a little more natural than maybe social media, but um
yeah. No,
you can
you're absolutely right. There's no such thing as a healthy addiction. I mean, although I think we could probably agree that if you're going to be addicted to something, apples and oranges or working out is probably better than heroin or vodka, right? But
agreed. Yeah.
the truth is that if we're addicted, what it means is that we have given away our power. We're no longer fully in control, and that's we're essentially we're creating ourselves as victims. I'm now a victim of the substance or a victim of the app or whatever it might be. But I think really what it comes down to, and again, I don't mean to make it sound, this is not to diminish anyone who is stuck in a cycle of addiction. But we know that people do escape these cycles. It is possible to do. And so the real
Mhm.
question is why why hasn't someone done that? What is it? Why are they stuck there? What's going on? I think the truth is that oftentimes we're where we choose to be. Someone once said, if you want to know what someone really, really wants, look and see what they have, because we're
Interesting.
creating all of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You know, I think with addiction too, something I've been looking into a lot is the connection with addiction to, traumas. Not necessarily, huge, trauma from war or stuff like that, but even those little conflicts and traumas that we experience naturally,
Sure,
that just
sure.
go unresolved, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and it's hard sometimes for people to understand. My guess is that most humans probably have some version of an abandonment scenario. Now, I don't know about you. My parents didn't abandon me, not in the way that we think about that. But I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I was doing a full day seminar in Austin, Texas. My mother still lives in Houston, but this was like 25, almost 30 years ago. And she'd never heard me speak in public. So she drove with a friend from Houston to Austin to hear me speak. And during the seminar, I always talk in a full day creating perfect health seminar about this emotional piece. And I was talking about this, and I gave a uh, just an example, possible scenario where, imagine that mom and dad have been focused on the baby for for a year, and finally think, okay, let's go have a weekend to ourselves, and so they leave the 1 year old with grandma, and they're driving away waving, bye honey, see you on Sunday, and the baby doesn't know what Sunday means. All the baby knows is that these two people, one of whom has always been there, are driving away, right? So I'm telling this story. And after the seminar, my assistant and I and my mother and her friend would go to Whole Foods, the original Whole Foods actually back then. It's no longer there. They rebuilt it. But in the original building, they had a beautiful salad bar, almost all organic, not like the ones they have. It was much better than what they have these days. Um, but we're sitting there in Whole Foods having dinner. And my mother says, honey, I'm so sorry. I mean, again, I was like 40 at the time. And I'm like, what are you sorry about, mom? She said, leaving you with grandma when you were a little baby. I didn't have any memory of that. Okay. I was just making up a scenario. But, it's entirely possible that infant, maybe me, somehow experienced that as a form of abandonment. And how I interact with that, I mean, you can't say, well, yeah, but mine was worse, because it doesn't really matter what happened. It's how we interact with what happens. It always is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one thing, we talk a lot about the responsibility uh component of health all the time. It's in the bio of the podcast. It's everywhere what we're doing, right? And obviously you already brought it up, the victim mindset before here. But as children, we're not responsible. We're not meant to be responsible,
No,
so we're almost like a victim to our experiences, right? And victim is probably the not the right word, but we are, all of our experience shape our worldview. And like you said, we don't understand these things, right? So we have our needs, and when our needs aren't being met, this is going to shape our worldview, regardless of, it was just grandma, right? It was just grandma. It's not a big deal. Like, grandma loves it and loves the kids very, very much. So it's kind of funny how that works, but
yeah.
it's the perspective. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because even this, which seems what you just said seems completely cut and dry. Children have no agency, right? We're subject to what our parents do or don't do. The adults in our lives, maybe older siblings, but we're as little kids, there isn't so much. We don't have much choice. We typically don't buy the groceries. We don't make those choices. Um, it's interesting though because there's another possible way to think about that, and that is again this is getting into the realm of the who knows, but this idea that we before we're born we choose our parents so we can have a specific type of experience, things we need to work out. Again, now this may or may not be the case. I happen to believe that it's true. It doesn't matter whether it is or not, but if it is, you could say, well, I actually chose to incarnate into this situation because I needed to experience certain things for my soul's growth. I don't know, but I mean, I think most people would say, no, of course, the child has no choice. Now, the thing is, I know people. I had a client once who was around 70, and he wound up spending an extended amount of time at my wellness center, and every night he cried because he believed his mother never loved him. Now, that may have been true. I have no idea. His mother had been dead for 50 years. Certainly, nothing he could do was going to change how she interacted with him half a century earlier. What's possible to change is how we choose to interact with that reality, the truth. She did whatever she did. She said whatever she said. She was or wasn't there for him. I mean, all of that is true. That's history. That's what happened. What's possible is that we get to a certain point with emotional maturity, we can say, okay, I understand that my mother did the very best that she could. Was it perfect? Far from it. Okay, but she did the best she could given how she was raised. I don't know if off color profanity is okay here, but there's one. Is that all right? I love it. One of my favorite poems was by a famous English poet named Philip Larkin, who wrote a poem called This Be the Verse. And it starts off with a bang. He said, they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by old style fools in hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man, hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. Um, so, I believe that the conclusion is meant to be dark humor, right? Die young and don't have children. But the premises are completely serious. This is exactly what happens. Okay. Our parents do the very best they can, but unless they're conscious enough to shift their programming, I mean, we're all programmed by what we see, what we experience every day as children. And this is the reason why a child uh, of a drug addict is much more likely to take drugs. A child of an alcoholic is much more likely to become an alcoholic. And a child who grows up watching his father beat his mother is much more likely to engage in the same behavior on one side of it or the other. That's it's just
100%.
statistically it's what
Yeah.
happens. Now, I don't think we're victims. And this is the thing. I mean, yes, as children, yeah, there's not much we can do. If you're an 8-year-old kid, you're not going to stand up to your father who is 4 times your size. Or if you do, it may not produce the results that you're hoping for. But at some point in time, we mature to the point where we can say, okay, you know what? That man, my father in this case is not my father, but that theoretical father, obviously he was hurting. Obviously he probably never felt loved himself. He never got his own needs met. We have the ability to see it from a different place and to forgive them completely for what they did because they did the best they could. And that's unfortunately it's a place that a lot of people never get to. I mean, again, I see people all the time, 50, 60, even older, who are still holding themselves as a victim to whatever happened in life. And I've always encouraged my clients to take full responsibility for everything, even when they don't know how they could have created it. I mean, I've created based on that idea, I've created some pretty ugly stuff in my life, right? Things people like, why would I create that? I don't know. Well, I mean, I think I do know. At some level, it's because there's this deeply embedded programming that says I'm not lovable or there's something wrong with me. Because this is what gets embedded in us when we're a year old, 2 years old. And if we don't do the work, it's always there. If we do the work, it may always be there, but we can mitigate it to some degree. We can at least
Yeah.
recognize it when it rears its ugly head and say, okay, that's, I feel that, but I know that's not true.
Mhm.
As opposed to living our life from the place of that's the truth.
Certainly. Yeah. I share a really similar belief, and I think it's a helpful one. It's certainly helped me on the path of taking the utmost responsibility for my life and things that happen. And, um, even taking a little too much responsibility, I think, is not an unhelpful thing, right? Because you're really, um, you're tuning into that that field of, you know, you're in control of a whole lot more than you think. And,
Right.
our thoughts and our mind are very powerful. And, um, I think it is helpful. It's helped me, to know that, it's all written, right? We're here for a reason. It's a more meaningful path, right? These are the lessons that I had to learn, and it's about becoming the best version of yourself. Um, the you know we had a great guest on, Dr. Gabe Roberts, and he said it doesn't matter really how healed you are. Your children will experience some sort of trauma, if we want to call it that. The same thing that you're experiencing. It's you can only become the best version of yourself, and our everyone needs to go through some sort of journey of that, like, in this way. And this might be a modern world problem because we didn't necessarily see this in the ancestral age either, when people were living in true alignment with nature, and they were able to experience these big traumatic events and not have these illnesses and all that stuff. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not that old. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened, but I mean, I think one thing that's probably true is that most humans, from the beginning, from the dawn of man, most humans that have lived until now, and really this is only changed in the last few decades, but up until now, until the middle of the 20th century, the baby boom generation, really the first generation where most people had the luxury of contemplating their belly buttons, thinking about their stuff, because most people in human history have been preoccupied with keeping enough food on the table, a roof over their family's head. And so the kind of self um, examination that we're capable of doing, self inquiry, was kind of a luxury for most people. So I mean, I don't know that they simply didn't have conflicts because they lived in nature. My guess is there's always conflict. whether it was two dominant men that were attracted to the same woman, or if it was wanting more of the food that was available. I mean, I don't know what it is, but my guess is that conflict may be just baked into the nature of what it is to be human. And I mean, again, perhaps, trust me, I wouldn't know, but perhaps once we've resolved all of our issues, as we get closer and closer to enlightenment, well, there theoretically there should be less and less conflict, right? But I think it's a reflection of the degree to which we're stuck. Some people, there's huge conflict all the time. I had a young client who will be happy to never see again, who picked a fight with his Uber driver because the guy wanted $1 more than he thought he should have to pay, and has a physical fight with this guy. Like, okay, that kind of conflict is completely unnecessary, um, as is probably true for most of what humans experience as conflict today. It's not necessary, except for the fact that people are still stuck in various ways.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, very, very good. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Um, I kind of have a little bit of a shift in conversation, but this kind of just popped into my mind. I want to know your thoughts on evolution for some reason. So this might be kind of random, but I'm sure
Yeah.
we could probably tie it into discussion too.
Well, it's an interesting topic, of course. Um, for many people, it's an either or, right? Either God created man, and here we are, and there's been no evolution, or we evolved from who knows what. And it seems clear. I mean, it's not evidence, but it does seem clear to me that evolution is real, and that people have adapted to their circumstances. It's interesting if we look at the human digestive tract, it is virtually identical to the digestive tract of chimps and bonobos, except for the proportional length of the entire digestive tract and the length of the large and small intestines. Why? Well, I would say it probably was due to evolution as humans had access to higher and higher quality food. Not these days, right? For the most part, but the point is that chimps and bonobos are forced in the months of the year where they're the rainiest, because they'll eat almost exclusively fruit when there's enough fruit available. But in the months where there's the most rain, there's the least amount of fruit. And at that point, they, to survive, they have to turn to things that are far less palatable, far less easy to digest, because they're much higher in fiber. And so they need a different system than we do. We're no longer in that situation. Maybe we would have been.
Very interesting. I think why it popped into my mind was, this like looking at, I guess, the animal model of, you know, the psychological, right? If we can even sort of draw any inferences here, why it's baked into why conflict is kind of baked into that human existence and maybe not animal. Maybe it is completely a part of the animal world as well. I suppose, competition and hierarchies, things of this nature is kind of a natural thing,
Yeah.
maybe as more of a source of a natural form of conflicts and traumas and things like that.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question. And again, listen, I don't pretend to have any expertise around animals, except for the two-legged ones that usually walk in my door. But I mean, for instance, there are many species where, again, fighting over female companionship is common. Um, the fur seals come to mind. It's a very interesting dynamic. I don't know how much you know about this, but the fur seals, they have a relatively short mating season. All the females swim to a particular beach. I don't know how they decide which one they're going to, but they all wind up in the same spot. And then all the males show up afterward, and they spend all of their time. It's like a week, I think, or maybe two. um, basically fighting and uh, reproducing, and they're fighting for the rights to reproduce with particular females. So the males spend all their time. They don't sleep. In fact, it's a fascinating thing because they, this is not, well, I suppose you could call it fasting. They don't take time to eat. I mean, they literally don't rest. They're busy fighting and reproducing when they can. And when the females all swim off, happily impregnated, the males, the first thing they do after this period of no food and tremendous activity, and this is not fasting to heal, this is fasting because they got better things to do. But when the females swim away, the first thing the males do is they all lay down and sleep. They rest first. But I mean, there's an example where there's clearly conflict going on, and this is a common thing. It doesn't happen in every species. It works differently. There are species where pairs mate for life. That happens. I think it's probably less common. It's not the rule; it's the exception. But that happens, and where that's happening, there's probably far less conflict around mating, but there may still be conflict around other things. If you look at chimps, for instance, will kill uh, groups of other primates that are infringing on their territory. Because perhaps they feel like their food is limited, and so if monkeys come in, they'll kill the monkeys. They might eat them sometimes, but they'll kill them. And so now, of course, the chimpanzees share over 98% of our DNA, and maybe it's baked into their society as well. I don't know. Again, I think there are certainly species where that's not the case.
Cool. Like it seems our more recent um civilizations have always had, major conflicts, especially over territory, the even the basic needs, right? Um I've always toyed with an idea that there's been some sort of utopian society that, like the ancient lost civilizations, and now I probably couldn't recite any evidence for them, but just
Yeah,
aside from watching some videos on this stuff, um, I've thought, maybe there were times, before written and known history that, uh, we were living in a societies that were much less geared towards conflict and traumas, and we were more cohesive and symbiotic with one another. Some that I've toyed with that idea, and even like you mentioned earlier, like as we all move towards self-actualization and individuation and becoming a whole integrated selves, maybe we will move towards something of that nature where there is less and less conflict. But
I
um,
certainly hope so. I certainly
yeah,
hope so. I mean,
yeah,
look at something. It's the idea of the Edenic societies you're talking about. It's a beautiful idea. It's something that I sought to create in Costa Rica.
yeah,
We've run into some issues, and I don't know that it's going to happen um, anytime soon. But I do know of various communities. I mean, there are some fraternal communities, for instance, that exist now, but there are many of them that existed in the past. And in most cases, and this is true, in fact, not just with fraternal communities, but if we look at conscious communities in general, where people come together to cohabitate, to co-create something because they share philosophical, religious, dietary, whatever it might be. They have some glue that holds them together. The vast majority of these communities don't last long term.
yeah, yeah,
And again, I think the reason why is because there are people there who haven't done their own work.
the true
And
work.
so I had clients, husband and wife, who started a fraternal community, and eventually, after I think around 8 years or so, they left it. They're like, you know what? This isn't what we had hoped for. This is what we wanted. We don't actually enjoy being here anymore because of ongoing conflict and so forth. And so, again, I do believe that we're capable of evolving past that point. But the
Mhm.
problem is, it requires each of us to be able to do the work, to be willing to do what they need to do, what we need to do. And some people aren't willing to. Now, I mean, one way to do it would be to do your very best to be as clear as possible about who people are before they join, or have some policy. I mean, most communities, in fact, do have policies where you have to spend 2 or 3 months living on site before you're allowed to join as a full or permanent member. It's a way to vet people. But I think even that, the problem is that most people are smart enough to portray themselves as they want to be seen for some period of time. Now, it's true eventually with enough time, but you can live with someone for a year and then only then realize sometimes who they really are. Sometimes you have to go through enough challenges together to see how you interact when things are difficult. And so I think, although it's a great idea, it may in fact not be long enough, given the fact that most people aren't so transparent. Many
Mhm.
people, let me say, aren't so
Yeah,
transparent.
many people. No, I'm glad that you brought that up because I was thinking that as well, and um, yeah, so interesting. And I'm thinking back to my old Jordan Peterson days, you know, and think what you want of the guy, but I mean, he talked a lot about this innate hierarchy or hierarchical nature of human beings, right? And that, we like there's always a hierarchy and how, as we institutionalize things and it moves towards tyranny, and so that power kind of goes to our heads, thinking of that Stanford prison experiment stuff. It's almost as though we'd have to transcend all of that as well, right? Because it's a complete shift in existence. It's not just a shift in perspective. It's a way of being and a way of life, if it
Yeah,
is a true possibility.
you're absolutely right, and I think the bottom line is we do have to transcend all of that for us to be able to create the kind of society that we, I'm sure, both love to live in. And again, it's not impossible, but it's a big task because there are a lot of people walking around that are completely oblivious to the fact that they've got this deep programming. They don't even know it's there. They may feel the effects of it, but they're still insisting that they're going through life as a victim, right? And what's true is that they have programming, and if they were willing to be conscious enough, they could do something to counteract the programming and still live much more purposefully, much more consciously. But that's obviously not happening much of the time. So
Hmm.
maybe I'd like to believe that with enough time, we'll eventually all move closer and closer to enlightenment, and it will become more possible for that to happen. Don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime. It certainly doesn't look this way. If we look at what's going on in the outside world right now, it looks more chaotic than at any point in my lifetime so far. And so it doesn't seem like everyone's on board yet, right? It seems like there are those people, uh, the New World Order types who are hell bent on controlling everybody else and on creating the world that best serves them. And unfortunately, that type of thinking is the antithesis of what we're talking about.
Hmm.
I mean, how much is enough?
Yeah.
I've already decided when I get to $800 zillion, I don't need any more.
It's a good number, I think.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, on that note, I think maybe we can wrap it up and get some final thoughts from you. Anything that you want to add to this episode? Anything that you feel
Well,
compelled to
it's,
share?
it's interesting because I've done a lot of podcasts over the last 15, 20 years. Never one, I mean, usually what happens, to be honest, is people ask me the same questions over and over again. And we're usually talking about diet and fasting and things we didn't really talk much about at all. The one thing I guess I'd like to leave people with is that as we started off, or I started off by saying, we have agreed everything is connected, interconnected. I firmly believe if you want to be as physically healthy as possible, you have to do the emotional work. You have to do the spiritual work. Okay, you have to recognize your connection. you I like to think of it. I don't have a candle holder here. At Tanglewood, when I'm speaking, we have on all the tables because we do these meditations after sundown, where we have these beautiful little glass candle holders in different colors. And when I'm talking about this, I love to do this at night when we're sitting there by candlelight. And I'll say, each of us is like the candle. Okay, love. We are love in the way that the candle is light. We are love. It emanates forth in all directions. The candle doesn't decide, I'm going to shine light over here, but not over there. It emanates forth in all directions. And that's what happens. That's what people saw when Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Lao Tzu, right? When these more evolved humans were doing what they were doing, people could see and feel that. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I've had the experience a couple times. Um, not with people that we might say were at that level, but for instance, again, think what you might of him and some of his choices. But I had an audience with a group of people with the Dalai Lama, and I swear to you, it just felt like love was emanating from his body. And the exact same experience with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, amazing in both cases. So that's what we are. The problem is, most people don't experience others as emanating love in all directions. And the reason why is because, if this were the candle holder, we're walking around believing, as I said before, I'm not lovable. I don't belong here. There's something wrong with me. I'm incapable of loving. We have all these disempowering, deeply programmed beliefs so that we don't see the true nature of what's there. In the same way that if we were to cover up the candle, there wouldn't be much light coming forth. So I think it's important for everyone to realize that this is our true nature, and that in order to get there, it goes both ways. We can't be as physically healthy as possible unless we do that work, but we can't be as spiritually healthy as possible until we get our bodies as clean as we can. And you'd mentioned to me in the first message you sent me, hey, we'd like to talk about frequency. Yeah, I mean, frequency is everything, right? It's about how we're vibrating. Um, we vibrate at our highest level when we're eating the foods that belong in the body, when we're drinking water, when we're getting sunlight, when we're exposed to fresh air, when we're moving our bodies, when we are coming from a place of love, when we're coming from a place of positive emotions. All those things dramatically affect our frequency, how we're vibrating. And we can shift them because they're easy practices that we can do, choices we can make that have a huge impact. But I think it's important for people watching, listening, to know that we can create amazing levels of health and vitality. There's nothing special about me, except that I got very sick. And unlike a lot of people who say, well, this is just my life, I'm stuck, this is it, woe is me. I said, thank God I was only 23 and I wasn't not okay. Right? If I'd been my age, I'm 63 now. If it had happened now, a lot of people at 63 would go, well, I'm getting old, this is just what happens. At 23, I'm like, this is not okay. Okay. I
Mhm.
will do anything I need to do to get my health and vitality back. And what happened was a huge realization that allowed me to see that I could go from being sicker than anyone I knew to being healthier than anyone I know. And everyone is capable of the same thing. So if you're listening to this and you're not feeling and functioning the way you want to, you can do it. And if I can help you, I'd be happy to, because that's what I've been focused on for the last nearly 40 years now.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. An amazing episode. Thank you so much for coming on and
Oh, you're
sharing
very
everything that you've done. One of the reasons why I kind of let it go this way is because you have so much amazing work out there, other podcasts, so even the social media stuff like that. People can learn about that other stuff everywhere, right? So I kind of like to take it in a direction that maybe the guest isn't too used to, I guess. And so I appreciate you saying that.
You
And
did a great job.
well, appreciate that. And so now I'd like to maybe share just where people can find you, how they can support you, things like that.
Sure. You'll find me on most major social media. It's Loren Lockman .official. I got hacked almost 2 years ago and lost everything. If you notice my YouTube channel, there's no new videos since January of 23. That's
Hmm.
why. I have a brand new YouTube channel. I've got one long form video up and a bunch of short videos. We've been putting them up for the last 3 or 4 weeks now. And I'll be doing more long form stuff there too. But it's laurenlockman.official on, I think YouTube might be underscore official, but Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, where I'm hardly even ever there, but I've got some stuff on it. Um, YouTube, tanglewoodwellnesscenter.com. If you go to the website, there's a contact us button on every page. I respond to those messages myself.
Amazing. Great. Yeah, and we'll put all the links down below, of course.
Great.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, listen, I really appreciate your time. This has been a fantastic episode.
My pleasure. Yeah, hope to see you again.
Certainly.
Take care,
Yeah.
everyone.
I want to thank you all for listening. You should all know that this is, of course, not medical advice, God forbid, and it's for your informational purposes only. But also remember that we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. We, the people in the greater forces, are together self healers, self governable, self teachers, and so much more. Make sure you reach out with your questions, criticisms, comments, concerns, whatever it is. Love to chat with you guys. Love to hear your thoughts on the episodes. Let me know what you think of this one. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen as well. And if you found it informative in any way, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, review, whatever you got to do on the platform you're on to help support us. That's really the best way to do it. Sharing is always best. Sharing with a friend, family member, um, so we get the word out. All right, guys. Remember, there are two types of people in the world: those believe they can, those believe they can't, and they are both correct. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care.